Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is Grant Cameron, and we have a special guest who's been around forever, and I've never interviewed him over all the years that I've done this. Expert in craft saucers, which is a big subject. Everybody wants to know about this. And I'm joined by my co-host, Cindy Voll, who's does physio in the morning, does 3 hours workouts every morning, and she's a model, and she's also now a UFO crazy person like the rest of us. She's got a lot of energy. She wants to do a lot of stuff, and she's brought us a new guest today. So welcome, Cindy, and let's see what we're going to be talking about today, because this is an important one for most people as to what they want to hear.
Well, where nuts and bolts are concerned, Michael Schratt, a private pilot military aerospace historian, has lectured across the country on the unique subject of mystery craft and classified propulsion systems buried deep within the military industrial complex. A guest speaker at the Oshkosh Air Adventure 2006-2007 event, world's largest air show. Michael has developed a number of contacts which have had firsthand experience dealing classified black program, including formal USAF pilot, retired naval personnel, and aerospace engineers that have maintained a top secret clearance. Michael currently works as a SolidWorks draftsman in an effort to expose government fraud, waste, and abuse. Michael devotes much of his free time researching aerospace technical documents, conducting interviews, and traveling to multiple university archives. Welcome, Michael Schratt.
Good to be with both of you.
Beautiful. You want to start, Cindy, or I can sort of ask something let me start by asking something that I have worked on that sort of parallels. In the 1990s, were you involved in the new Majestic 12 documents? Have you worked with Ryan Wood? Because we're about to interview Ryan Wood,
Yeah.
and that will tie into your crash material and where the government has gone.
Ryan Wood is a very good friend of mine. He worked with his father, Bob, on the Majestic 12 documents, but I had no hand in that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So you've gone down the same sort of route. So I think he wrote a book. Did you help him write the book on the crash
Oh, I
saucer
didn't
stuff?
help him
No.
write the book.
Because he had what, 120 or something? He had a lot of crash saucer stories.
Well, his new book, Magic Eyes Only, has 104 crash retrieval cases within it. And now
Wow.
when you link that up with Leonard Stringfield, 119 crash retrieval cases, now we've got a lot of firepower here.
There you go. And I guess you're going to do a PowerPoint presentation, which we'll let you do. And then I've got a pile of questions. You got a question before we start, Cindy, in terms of he came to visit you. You actually have go to visit UFO researchers, and you have UFO researchers come to you, and you're busy picking everybody's brain to figure out what's going on. Have you figured out what's going on yet, Cindy?
Well, it's all consciousness.
Okay.
It
Oh,
really, really is all consciousness. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, the nuts and bolts that Michael's talking about gives us a foundation, but as you dive into this rabbit hole, it's really consciousness and it's stranger than you can imagine
There
because
you
it's
go.
consciousness. I think that it's important, Michael, for our audience that you explain who Leonard Stringfield is because he
I,
has the
I can do that in the body of our PowerPoint.
Okay.
I'll
Okay,
explain all of that. Yes.
Okay.
perfect. All
So
right.
you can start, and we'll be quiet, and we'll take our pens, and we'll make notes,
Yeah.
and we'll learn something.
All right. Well, we'll all learn something here. Okay.
Okay.
So I'm going to go to share screen, and I'm going to go here, and I'm going to say share. Okay.
There you go. It's coming.
Now, let's
And
see if we can
go full screen.
go to full screen. Right. I've got this other screen in the way here. Let's see. Okay. One more. From beginning. Okay. You see that?
If you see it full screen, I still don't see it full screen, but yeah, it looks like it's doing the right thing. Yeah.
It's full screen on mine. Cindy, you
Okay.
see
Okay.
full
So
screen?
then that's
Yeah.
okay. Go ahead.
It is.
And then if I advance one, does it advance for you?
Here it goes. Yep.
Yep.
Okay, good. All right, so great to be with both of you. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to join all of you today. Now, the title of this presentation is called Retrievals of the Third Kind: Cosmic Crashes, Corpses, and Cover-Ups. This is really an homage to Leonard Stringfield. We want to honor his work. We absolutely want to honor his work. Now,
Did you ever meet him?
I never met him.
The only time I met him was at the 78 MUFON conference in Dayton, where he gave the lecture, first crash saucer alien body lecture, and he had death threats, and they had to move him to a different hotel. It was it was kind of an exciting time back 1978.
You were there, Grant. Wow, that's great.
Yeah, I was there. It was one of the few. I've only been to a couple. That was one I got lucky to be spend maybe 5 or 10 minutes talking to him about the Canadian crash retrieval stuff.
Wow. Okay, well, that was a perfect one to get to. All right, so UFO crash retrieval is the ultimate holy grail of UFO research. Now, the question is, why are we calling it the ultimate holy grail of UFO research? And it's actually pretty simple, because it's the crash retrievals that are going to facilitate disclosure, because they have the body, the debris, and the craft themselves all wrapped up into one entity. This, beyond anything else, really is going to be the vehicle that facilitates disclosure. Anything less than this, and all of us are going to be here another 50 years and we still won't know what's going on. We've already tried the democratic process for 80 years now, and it certainly appears that the democratic process has failed us. They've had plenty of time to come out with this information, and we've had these recent congressional hearings, and yet here we are. We still don't know exactly what's going on. So as we go through this presentation, we're going to be reviewing these cases, but I thought it's important that we start here, because this is ground zero. It's the crash retrievals, the heart of the matter, that's going to move this field forward. We'll continue here. A couple of quick announcements. The content of each case highlighted in this presentation has remained intact per the description of the original source. The identity of first-hand sources will be protected per Leonard Stringfield's original agreement with his military contacts. The visual aids used in this presentation are computer-generated forensic composite illustrations and sketches, which originated from the specific details provided by Leonard's sources. So these are the sources of where Leonard got his information. 3-star U.S. Air Force generals, U.S. Air Force fighter pilots, astronauts, commercial pilots, air traffic controllers, neurosurgeons, pathologists, theoretical physicists and mathematicians, U.S. Army officers, U.S. Navy officers, military police, high-level Pentagon officials, top military brass, scientists and engineers who worked at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base and other government facilities. So this just gives you a brief overview cross-section of the caliber of first-hand military witnesses that Leonard got his information from. Couple of quick quotes. Number one, UFO crash retrievals can't be real, because if they were, I would have read about it in the local newspaper. That's number one. Number two, there are not now, nor ever have been, any extraterrestrial visitors or equipment on Wright-Patterson Air Force Base. Now, that is their official press release from July 1980. So they're telling us they don't have anything on the base. So what we're going to do in this presentation is we're going to take Leonard Stringfield's firsthand military witnesses, and we're going to go up against the United States Air Force, and we'll see who kind of comes out on top here. So this is the man of the hour. This is Leonard Stringfield. Over a 30-year time period, he collected dozens and dozens of these firsthand military witnesses, people who held the bodies, people who were on the autopsy teams, people who loaded craft onto 18-wheeler tractor trailer trucks and shipped them to Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, people who were X-ray technicians. These are the people that Leonard had dealt with. So I think it's important that we talk about who Leonard is, who Leonard was, what's his biography, a little bit of background on him. So he grew up in Cincinnati, Ohio. By the time he graduated from high school in 1939, he had already memorized the entire dictionary. They gave this guy a nickname. They called him Webster because he was that good. He actually memorized the entire dictionary. So the thought here is that this is the perfect person to be cataloging these military witnesses to crash retrievals. He joined the military as soon as he heard about the attack on Pearl Harbor, December 7th, 1941. During World War II, Leonard served in the intelligence service of the 5th Air Force in the Southwest Pacific Theater. He wrote 2 books, Inside Saucer Post 3-0 back in 1957, Situation Red, the UFO Siege back in 1977. Leonard served as director of the world's largest UFO research group in the mid-1950s, Civilian Research Interplanetary Flying Objects. He received 8,000 letters in the first 2 weeks of existence. So early on, there was a huge interest in this. This is early on, absolutely huge interest. Now, the next bullet item is the one that we really want to dig down on here. His lecture at the UFO Crash Retrieval 1978 MUFON Symposium in Dayton, Ohio, caused an international sensation. Grant already talked about this a little bit. So why did it cause an international sensation? Number one, the whole concept of UFO crash retrievals back in 1978 was a new entity back then. The whole concept was just coming onto the radar screen. Roswell was coming on. The other thing is, Leonard made an agreement with his firsthand military witnesses. He would preserve an important part of our national history, but the names had to be kept under wraps. He would not release the identity of his witnesses. So there was some pushback at the MUFON Symposium back in 1978 because there was no way to independently verify what Leonard was talking about because he wouldn't release the names. Okay, Leonard passed away on December 18th, 1994. Now, there was one event in Leonard's life that changed the entire trajectory of his being. One event. We're going to talk about that right here. On August 30th, 1945, Leonard had a Foo Fighter sighting from inside a twin-engine C-47 while traveling from Okinawa to Iwo Jima. So here he is looking outside the window here. There were 2 Foo Fighters near the position of the aircraft. One of the engines started sputtering out, and they thought they were going to go ditch it into the drink. But when the Foo Fighters peeled away, engine came back on, and they landed safely. But that never left Leonard's mind. That instilled this interest in Foo Fighters and UFOs from a very early time frame. It never left him. So here's Newcastle Sun, January 3rd, 1945. Foo Fighters are latest. Pilots flying over Germany at night report that strange balls of fire are following them around on their missions. They have christened these strange phenomenon Foo Fighters. So here we have the Allied B-17s over Berlin at night, and we've got Foo Fighters following our Allied B-17s. Now, this also happened at B-24 Liberator pilots, and it happened in the Pacific Theater with the B-29 pilots as well. So we've got 3 different types of bombers that had Foo Fighter sightings during World War II. Let's continue on here. Author continues quest for truth about UFOs. Cincinnati Enquirer, July 19th, 1993. Quote, what I have collected would be the biggest thing since Christ, really. That's a bold statement by Leonard, but he's right. All we need is one of these things. It would be a huge event, right? Let's continue on here. At one time, Leonard collected a massive archive of 22 bank boxes of original correspondence letters, drawings, audio tapes, testimony from his sources. This is the kind of material that needs to be brought into open congressional hearings in Washington, D.C., because it has the names, the addresses, telephone numbers of these firsthand military witnesses. Absolutely needs to go to Congress. So I want to take everyone to the 1978 MUFON Symposium. Here we are. We're going to go inside the symposium now. And here is Leonard giving his address on retrievals of the third kind, his famous address. Now, we have Leonard here. Let's go to the next slide. Now, what he presented, and Grant is already familiar with this because he was there. He presented this paper titled Retrievals of the Third Kind, a case study of alleged UFOs and occupants in military custody. Within this 100-page document, there were 12 of his military witnesses, and he laid all this out in great detail. I advise everyone and encourage everyone to get a copy of these proceedings. They're great. It's groundbreaking. It's the first time it's the first shot over the bow of getting this information out into the public. So you can kind of see why it was controversial. It was groundbreaking. Now, everything that we're going to be talking about today comes from this publication, UFO Crash Retrievals, the Complete Investigation Status Reports 1 through 7 by Leonard Stringfield. So what I want to provide for you is the page number, the case number, give you all the details within this book so you can verify this on your own. Not only that, we talked about Ryan's book, Magic Eyes Only, Earth's Encounters with Extraterrestrial Technology. So between Leonard's publication and Ryan Wood's republication of this book, now we've got a tremendous amount of firepower to go up against any government entity here. Now, before we begin, I want to bring everyone to Las Vegas. And we know that Leonard has 119 crash retrieval cases. We're going to go inside Caesar's Palace, and we're going to go to the roulette wheel that has 120 spaces, and we're going to put down a bet for each 119 of Leonard's crash retrieval witnesses. And you can kind of see the numbers here, everybody. We can't lose. We're going to win every time. The odds are in our favor. We can't lose. All we need is one of these cases to be authentic, and the whole concept of UFO crash retrieval non-existence completely falls apart. All we need is one. The odds are in our favor. Now, isn't it wonderful in this country that we have something called the First Amendment, our right to free speech? And if you extrapolate what that means, what it means is it means that the government and the Air Force, they don't own anything. We as taxpayers, we own the Air Force bases, we own the planes, we own all of the runways, we own the buildings, we pay for their salaries. So what that means is that the U.S. Air Force is nothing more than a temporary custodian of these assets. We own these things, so we have every right to question authority. That's the point I want to make here. All right, now let's go very quickly to the hearings, July 26, 2023. We've got Ryan Graves, Navy pilot. We've got David Grush, U.S. Air Force Intel. We've got David Fravor, Navy pilot, back in 2023. Now, we will drill down very quickly on what David Grush had said, and this is, quote, I was informed in the course of my official duties of a multi-decade UAP crash retrieval program. So again, we don't have to rely on Leonard. Here we have a government intel official in open congressional hearings in downtown Washington at our nation's capital telling us that there's an ongoing UAP crash retrieval program. Here is Waterloo Region Record, July 27th, 2023. He talks about here UFOs is being concealed. A crash retrieval program is being concealed. I was informed in the course of my official duties. We already talked about that. So here again, newspaper clippings talking about this UAP crash retrieval program. I want to give credit to Rudy Gardea, who's my artist, who did all of the original sketches here to make these cases come alive and preserve an important part of our national history. Now we're going to begin here. This is 1942 and an army base north of Georgia that even Leonard didn't even know where it was. Page number is 319. Our witness served in a key civilian capacity. This craft measured 15 feet in diameter. It was 10 feet high. The primary eyewitness said that there were hieroglyphic type writings written along the outer circumference of the craft itself and also on the interior of the upper portion of the dome. There were three areas. There was a control area, there was a seating area, and then on the lower portion, there was an entryway hatch. There were 4 crew members taken alive. 1 was female, 5 feet tall, 90 pounds, large black eyes, milky white skin, and the report said that they had teeth. So I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next slide here, and we'll do a blow up of these hieroglyphic type writings. Now, by default, there must be a transnational team of engineers and linguistic experts that are trying to crack the code of what these hieroglyphic sightings mean. There has to be a team doing this. They must have 3-ring binders that are really thick that go into detail on this. So what I want to do now is we're going to take you into this craft. We're going to walk around the side of this thing. We're going to look at the hull breach. We're going to look at the hieroglyphic writings. And then I want to take you up in the stairs and bring you inside the craft here. Okay, so now we're in the Army facility. We're looking at this hieroglyphic type writing. Let me view another 40 degrees over. And now we can see the hull breach that's talked about by the witness that Leonard had talked to and made contact with. Let's go another 30 degrees and we'll take you up the stairs inside the entryway hatch into this craft itself. Now we're looking dead on into the divider. Let's go one more slide here. Off to the left, we've got the seating area. Off to the right, we've got the control area. You can kind of see the beginnings of the hieroglyphic writing written on the inside wall of the upper dome here. I'm going to blow this up. So here's the seating arrangement. Now, the only way this thing works, because the witness said it was 15 feet in diameter and it was 10 feet tall, the only way this works is if this whole craft has a cavernous interior and then a sub-basement with an entryway hatch. That's the only way this works. Let's continue on here. Here is the control area. The witness said that there was a large wraparound window at the forward port of this craft itself. We'll do a little bit of a blow up so you can see this control panel. And this is based off the firsthand testimony that Leonard had identified who was there. Let's do a little bit of a blow up here. We did the best we could with the information that we were given from Leonard's source here. Now, we want to look at the bodies. The bodies were about 5 feet tall. They were wearing a one-piece tight-fitting flight suit. They had oversized head, oversized eyes, slit for a mouth, minute nose. We'll blow up here. Again, one was female. Now, I've got 2 cases within the Streamfield reports about female entities being recovered with what we believe are male entities as well. So one more blow up here for these 5 foot tall ET bodies that were recovered. Okay, next one. Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio, 1946. It's important to note that the Air Force did not exist until 1947. So back in 1946, it was known as Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio. Our source is a 6-year-old boy named Tex Martin. He was with his friend with his father in 1946 because he was doing very good in his grades. Now, the reference for this is page 242, 243 in the book. So I want everyone to follow along if they want. Now, what I've got here is a period correct photograph of hangar complex number 4 that has 5 bays. The bay to the right is Bay E. So again, the testimony from a 6-year-old child and then his father. So we don't have to rely on just a 6-year-old boy. We have his grown-up father as well. Now, there was an adjoining cafeteria to the main hangar building. And there was basically this person who was cleaning up. And he was getting these areas cleaned up. You could call him a custodian if you want to. But he noticed this 6-year-old boy. And he said, this seems like a fine young man. Why don't I buy him a soda pop? So he asked permission from his father if it was be okay. The father said, fine. So he handed this soda pop to this 6-year-old boy. And you can kind of see here's Rudy's drawing, roughing it out in rough scale. The second he did that, the door opened up and a military personnel walked through the doorway. And our 6-year-old Tex Martin is now looking inside this hangar. And what does he see? He sees 2 18-wheeler tractor-trailer lowboy trucks with unknown tarp debris. There were a couple of Jeeps there. There were military personnel there. He also said that there was an 18-foot diameter dish-shaped craft sitting on tripod landing gear. And then he said there were at least 3 ET bodies deceased laying on the hangar floor on stretches. He got a good look at this. So let me go to the next slide here. And you can see our witness is in the background. And this is all laid out in rough format. Let's go to the refined drawing. And this is what we came up with to preserve an important part of our national history. So again, there were 2 18-wheeler tractor-trailer lowboy trucks with unknown tarp debris. There were military personnel, at least 2 Jeeps there. There was a 18 to 20-foot diameter dish-shaped craft that had a ring wrapped around the outer circumference. And then he said He could see 3 dead ET corpses laying on stretchers on the hangar floor. So what we want to do now, we're going to take Rudy's refined drawing. We're going to go to the next slide, and let's see if we can make this come alive to really get a good idea of what this looked like. You can see our witness in the background of the hangar looking inside. So I want to take this to the next step. Again, this is Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio, back in 1946. This is before Roswell. Let's go and take it to the next step and make it even more real. And this is what I came up with to make this as real as we can possibly make it. And as we go through these cases, the body count will go up, the craft count goes up. So these senators and congressmen, they can't claim that there isn't any evidence. We've got the evidence right here. Let's continue on. Next one, Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio, 1946. So same time frame, same location. The witness, our source, is a private who worked in records management. And this is from the book Space, the Final Frontier, page 59 by Clark McClellan. I'm going to go to the next slide here. This is the cover of the book. So if anyone wants to follow along, this is where I got the information. Within this book is this sketch right here. Now, this came from Arkansas on a railroad flat car all the way to Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio. So they transported this thing on a flat railroad car all the way to Wright Field. It was 15 feet in diameter, 7 feet tall, highly polished mirror reflective exterior. No visible means of propulsion, no rivets, no socket head cap screws, no hex head cap screws, no welds. You can see on the drawing that there was a series of rectangular windows wrapped around the outer circumference of the craft itself. Really, this highly polished chrome exterior. This is my AutoCAD drawing that gives you an idea of what this thing looks like. Now, there was about a 3-foot diameter central core that ran from the bottom of the craft through the center midpoint, terminating at the top. Now, if you look on my AutoCAD drawing up to the upper right-hand section, I've peeled back the skin so that you can see this central column. Now, if you look one window from left of center, there is a red dot. That is the attempted point of entry where these white lab coat technicians were using a diamond tip drill bit to try to get into these things. And they couldn't do it. I've got 3 other cases of lab coat technicians desperately trying to breach the hull of these craft with diamond tip drill bits, and they can't do it. Obviously, what they're trying to do is reverse engineer the propulsion system here. So this was the very first pass color illustration, just to give you an idea of what this craft may look. This is a kindergarten version of it, just to get the ball rolling. And can we do better than this, right? So here is Joseph Wraith, my friend Joseph Wraith. He did a great job of improving upon this. He's peeled back the skin so that you can see this central column in the very center of this craft, terminating up at the top portion here. Okay, so we have the private and records management. When he walked in, he was met with a guard who he knew. They were both friends. So this guard says, you know what? I got something I want to show you. He walks him back to the hangar, and here is this craft sitting on the hangar floor. He said that off to the right, there was a tarp that was partially folded up. In the foreground, there was a toolbox opened up with an electric drill and a diamond dip drill bit. So our source was at the right place at the right time when they were changing shift, and he got a good look at this thing. He got a chance to see this thing up close. Now, let's see if we can go to the full color illustration to make this case come alive. And this is what we came up with what this private and records management claimed he saw back in 1946 at Wright Field, Dayton, Ohio. All right, now, who would have a need to know about this information, 1946, 1947 timeframe? This is a letter from Nathan Twining, Wright Field Patterson Air Force Base commander, to Air Force Brigadier General George Shulgin, September 23rd, 1947. Quote, "The phenomenon reported is something real and not visionary or fictitious." Now, later in this document, that I know Grant knows all about this, it talks about the form, fit, and function of these craft. It talks about the flight path characteristics of these vehicles. So this is a gentleman who had a need to know and would know about these retrieval operations. All right, next one. Papagos Indian Reservation, west of Globe, Arizona, January 1947. So we're already 2, 3, 4 in here. We haven't even made it to Roswell yet. This is north of Superstition Mountains. Our source is a witness who served in the U.S. Navy during World War II. Reference page 93, case A10. The push pin is exactly where I believe this all went down, west of Globe, Arizona. So here we have 2 military personnel. They're in a Jeep. They're driving down not too far from the Superstition Mountains on an unimproved surface. All of a sudden, 2 MPs stop these personnel, tell them that you're not supposed to be here. This is a classified, restricted area. Get out of here immediately. However, it was already too late because here you can see in Rudy's drawing, another 50 feet down the road here off to the left, there was a 30-foot diameter dish-shaped craft that augured in at a 40-degree angle. It had a low-rise dome on top. There were 2 rings wrapped around the outer circumference, and then there was what looked like indented windows, which I don't think are windows. I think they're a sensor array. They were wrapped around the outer circumference of the disc-shaped craft itself. Now, let's go to the next slide so we can make this come alive a little bit. This is recovered not too far from the Superstition Mountains. I've been around that area. I kind of know where that area is. Now, let's see if we can make this even more real. Go to the next slide here, and this is what I came up with. Again, this is west of Globe, Arizona, 1947 timeline, and they are recovering these vehicles. They absolutely are recovering these vehicles here. White Sands, New Mexico, July 4th, 1947. Our source is a technical sergeant, U.S. Army Air Force, page 196. So what you see here on this slide, the yellow represents the outer boundary of White Sands Missile Range. This thing came down at night, according to the report, came down at night. Very large craft, 150 feet in diameter. I want to stress that this whole scene was, according to the source, excruciatingly well lit. They had searchlights. They had spotlights. They had light-alls shining down on this thing. The report said that it had people with rubber suits with Geiger counters walking around this. The report also said that there were cameramen with still cameras taking photographs of this. There was other personnel that had motion picture film reel cameras. They were documenting all of this. This was all completely excruciatingly well documented. Here's our first pass color illustration by Joel Christopher Payne. Want to give him credit. So it just gives you an idea of what this may have looked like at White Sands, New Mexico. So I thought, why don't we do this one better? Why don't we see if we can make this even more realistic? And this is what I came up with, just to give you an idea of what came down on White Sands Missile Range. Let's do one more here, just to give you an idea. So again, searchlights, motion picture film camera, still camera, photography was taken of this entire operation. So what is the actionable item that we can take away from this particular retrieval? Since still photography and motion picture film was recorded of this event, senators and congressmen with the appropriate security clearances should track down and utilize this evidence for future public hearings. Now, there's a problem here, though, right? Because these senators and congressmen in Washington, D.C., number one, they don't have a high enough security clearance, and number two, they don't have a need to know. So that's the brick wall we're running into here with these congressional hearings in Washington, D.C. Next one, UFO Crash Retrieval in 1947, seen in a warehouse at Berkeley University. Albert Bruce Collins, deceased, is our witness. He was a metallurgical engineer. This is UFO Crash Retrievals, page 197. Now, you can imagine this. This gentleman was at the right place at the right time when this 18-wheeler tractor-trailer lowboy trucks backs into the warehouse at Berkeley University. And so here he is, and he said that this was literally an egg. This is a off-white colored egg, 30 feet across, 15 feet high, was sitting on the trailer of the 18-wheeler tractor trailer lowboy truck. He said that there was a crack in the middle of the egg that literally looked like a cracked egg. And in the forward portion of this egg, there was a composite panel. In the dead center of this egg, there was a 36-inch diameter central core or yolk or egg yolk. Wrapped around the outer circumference of this core was another composite panel. And then he said, which I thought was interesting, there was debris and shrapnel sticking out of the bottom right-hand corner of the craft itself, like there was an internal implosion. That's exactly what this gentleman described. I'm going to go to the next slide here. This gives you an idea of what it may have looked like. And here's our witness. He's looking at all this. Can't believe what he's seeing. Let's go one more and make this even more real. It may still be there today. My question is, was this the interior of a much larger craft, or was this a standalone vehicle? Was this the beginning of the Tic Tac UAP that we hear so much about? Very good possibility. Let's go on here. Carrot Patch, south of Salina, California, July, August, 1947. Two witnesses were workers in a nearby carrot patch. That's who our witnesses were. Now, in this report, there was a sketch. There was a 3-page report. There was a sketch. This is not a large craft. It was 9 feet in diameter, 4 feet tall. It had a flat top to it. There was a double row of indented windows or portholes that I don't think were windows. I think they're sensor arrays. Also within this report, there was a map. X marks the spot. So if we could go back in time, I could probably take anyone plus or minus 200 feet of where this thing actually came down. Let's continue on here. Here was the first pass AutoCAD drawing that gives you an idea of what this craft looks like. Not a large craft, 9 feet in diameter, 4 feet tall with a flat top. Here was the first pass SolidWorks rendering. So again, there appears to be something with this double row of indented, what appear to be windows. This pops up multiple times here. So here's Rudy's drawing. Now, when this thing came down, it was at night. The foreman saw it first. The next morning, he alerted his two 19-year-old workers and said, hey, I got something I want to show you. So he brings them over to where this craft was. One of these 19-year-old workers got up enough guts and confidence. He kicked the side of it with his boot. He made contact with this. Within 5 minutes, there was a convoy of military vehicles that showed up with this 6x6 troop transport that you see in Rudy's drawing, towing a trailer. Both 19-year-old workers are told to get out of the area, but they did see the military personnel manhandle this craft onto the trailer, cover it with a tarp. They put chains on it. They vacated the area. They saw the entire retrieval operation. Here's our full color rendering that gives you an idea of what this retrieval operation may have looked like. And then I wanted to see if I could take it even further here. Something like this went down at a carrot patch south of Salinas, California during that time frame. This is all prior to Roswell here. Now, the $64 million question, and this is one of Leonard's witnesses here. Where are the top secret files, repeat, files on UFO crash retrievals being stored? And according to Leonard's witness, they are kept in 3 large computer banks spread throughout the country. Number 1, Wright-Patterson Air Force, Dayton, Ohio. This is not a surprise to us or Grant. We already knew that. Number 2, CIA headquarters, Langley, Virginia. Number 3, NSA headquarters, Fort Meade, Maryland. And then the witness said, quote, they will bend in any direction to keep them secret. He left us with this cryptic remark. Now, there are multiple places around the country where they keep the files. They don't have a single point failure. They're not going to risk losing things. So they are going to diversify their portfolio. That's absolutely what they've done here. We talked about the files. Now we want to talk about where are the locations of the ET craft being stored. According to the same witness, number 1, NSA headquarters, Fort Meade, Maryland. MacDill Air Force Base, Tampa, Florida. Number 3, Seymour Johnson Air Force Base, Goldsboro, North Carolina. And so what they've done, they're smart. They don't work on a single point failure. They work on diversifying their portfolio. They cannot afford to lose their assets, putting all their eggs in one basket. Okay, next one, C-119 flying boxcar, Sierra Madre Valley, Mexico, prior to 1951, I believe 1948 timeframe. Our witness is an engineer who worked in highway construction. The source is page 32 in Leonard's book. This is not a very big craft. This is only 9 feet in diameter. Now, how do we know it's only 9 feet in diameter? How do we know that? It's simple, because if you take a tape measure and you measure the interior walls of the C-119 flying boxcar, it's 9 feet 10 inches across, thereby leaving 5 inches of clearance on either side. That gives you a 9-foot diameter craft. We know it. It can't be any bigger than 9 feet across. So here's Rudy's drawing. We've got the clamshell cargo bay doors open up. We're bringing the craft inside on an inclined plane within the aft portion of the C-119 flying boxcar. Here's Joseph Race full color rendering. I'm going to give credit to him. I'm going to give you a different perspective here. We're going to zoom in so we can see the retrieval operation in full swing now. We're going to do another one here. Now, he said that the bodies were very small and they were burnt. And the witness said that when he knelt down to the bodies and he touches their faces, their skin came out on his fingertips. So it was not for the faint of heart. This is a very gruesome recovery. Now, what I wanted to do now is I thought, can we add to the realism? Can we take this one step further here? So I went back to Joseph Wraith. We revisited this site and we added even more realism. So I'm going to take you and fly you down at a 45-degree look down angle so that you can see this entire scene here. This is about a 40-degree look down angle. We've got the C-119. Let me zoom in a little bit closer here. Now we can see the clamshell bay doors opened up, and we'll zoom in a little bit closer here. This is about eye level looking on the scene. We've got military trucks on the scene. And this engineer who worked in highway construction was asked to assist the U.S. military in retrieving this dish-shaped craft. So this is about a 60-degree look-down angle. I'm going to zoom in a little bit closer here. And now you can kind of see the bodies that were, according to him, small stature. They were burnt. The skin came out on his fingertips. So this is the Sierra Madre crash retrieval operation. Now, that brings us to this gentleman. And I know, Grant, you know who this is. Our very good friend, John Schuessler, essentially the founder of MUFON here. Now, I consider John Schuessler a credible witness. John's father knew someone who served as a civilian guard at the receiving gate at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base in 1952. This gentleman told John Schuessler, well, actually, he told his father, and his father told John Schuessler that he was present when a tractor trailer came into the base. Quote, everything delivered had to pass through me because he had to see the manifest, and he saw a dish-shaped craft on an 18-wheeler tractor trailer, and then he said that he also saw bodies packed in crates. This is page 10, abstract 3. So I wanted to think, let's get a visual aid. What did this look like? And this is what I came up with this craft under wraps on a tarp, on a trailer, going through the receiving gate back in 1952. So coming from John Schuessler, I believe this to be a credible case. 100%. John Schuessler has no reason to lie at this. I think we can bank on this particular case here. Next one, the Pentagon, 1952, off-limits room. This is page 152, case 1. So if anyone wants to follow along, that's the reference. We have a Pentagon worker. We believe she went to a off-limits room at the basement at the Pentagon, okay? And so she's at this basement facility. She goes into this dark, dusty room. There's some boxes off to the corner. And what does she see? She sees a pickled alien in a glass jar. This is according to Leonard Stringfield. and she can't believe what she's seeing. Within 10 seconds, she feels this hand on her arm. It's a military police telling her to get out of here immediately. You're not supposed to be here. So let me go to the next rendering to give you an idea what this may have looked like. This was my second pass on trying to make this more believable and real so we can make this and preserve an important part of our national history. Let's go one more. And this is what this woman claims that she saw at the Pentagon in 1952. Now, my question is, could this really happen? Do we have any evidence that any of this is real? So I started digging. I started going into the newspaper clippings. And here we have Dick Cheney, new defense chief gets lost in the Pentagon basement. Peninsula Times Tribune, March 25th, 1989. So bottom line is Dick Cheney was at an upper level at the Pentagon. He finished his meeting. He went into the elevator. He hit the button thinking it would drop him down into the carport. It went one lower into the basement, and the the defense chief got lost in the Pentagon basement. So yes, indeed, conceivably, this could have happened to our witness back in 1952 at the Pentagon. It's absolutely conceivable that this could have happened. So special note, something very serious appears to have been going on regarding UFO crash retrieval cases for the year 1953. And Grant, I want to ask you, have you heard about an increase in crash retrieval cases for the year 1953?
Um, Not so much the crashes, but in terms of sightings and stuff, there was quite a bit.
Okay.
And just to your last point, I don't know if you've seen the interview. I did an interview. I went to Ohio to interview two women in their 80s. They're both dead now, but they told a story about the sub basement of the Capitol, that their father, who was a minister in Ohio, had told them the story separately.
Okay.
1948, the one was told, and the other one a little bit later, about pickled aliens in the sub basement of the Capitol being shown by the Secretary of State was showing their father these bodies. So that sort of lines up with the story you've got. But I've got the actual video of them describing this story back
Wow.
maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago. I did this interview.
Wow, that's great. Grant, do you want to talk about the interview that was conducted with Dick Cheney with a contact of yours, and you got your question all the way to Dick Cheney and what his reaction was?
Yeah, well, that was I learned how to get on radio talk shows, and he was on with Diana Rehm with his public broadcasting in Washington, and I was the first one on the line, and that was what the question I asked him, which I always said to people, you don't want to ask him, have you seen a UFO or what do you think about UFOs? Because he's going to walk around the question. So the question I asked Dick Cheney was, because he had been Secretary of Defense under Bush, he had been Chief of Staff under Ford, and he was now the Vice President. He was actually in the White House when I talked to him. And I said, in all your jobs in government, have you ever been briefed on the subject of UFOs? If so, when was it and what were you told? So that's the old briefing question is like, did you actually, someone actually sit down and tell you the truth of what was going on? And he said, if I had been briefed on that subject, it would probably be classified and I wouldn't be talking about it. And then they cut me off. And then Diana Rehm said, well, have you had any meetings on UFOs since you got to the White House? And he said, no, I've had no meetings on UFOs since I got to the White House.
Okay, so you could hear his voice, correct?
Yes.
Okay, it's difficult to do this, but what was his demeanor when he said that? What was his sense, stress, and modulation when he said that?
Well, he was pretty caught off guard. He never figured
Oh
for a
yeah.
minute that question was coming. And in fact, the questions after that were all had to do with Halliburton. I think it was five questions, and four of them, three of them were doing with him ripping off people with Halliburton, and mine was the UFO question. He said, "You really got a real—I can't remember the word he used for it. You really got a real special bunch of people asking questions today, or something like that." It was like he was totally caught off guard. But
Okay.
the second question, once he caught on what was going on, because there was a hesitation before he answered the question, and he was trying to think of how to word it. But once they asked him the second question about have there been any meetings at the UFO, you could tell that he had regained his sense and he knew exactly how to answer the question. But he was
Yeah.
totally caught off guard, and he was very shocked at having to answer this question. because it was very direct in terms of the fact that there is actually a secret, and that he was always rumored to be the guy who would have been on MJ-12. He would have been the guy that was briefed. In fact, she asked him on the interview. She said the rumor was at that time that Bush was not smart enough to run the White House, and that Dick Cheney was actually the president, and he was telling Bush what to do. He actually asked him that question: "Are you running the White House?" And he said, "No, I'm not running the White House." So he was seen as this extremely powerful person that would have been briefed if there was a briefing, and that's why I hit him with the briefing question.
Okay, so Grant, I want to ask you, what do you believe Dick Cheney knows about UFOs? And second, what did Bush Sr. know about it as well?
Well, I would say that he knew it's on the need to know basis. I remember we talked to Dr. Eric Walker, who was the highest official I'd ever come
Right.
across, and he basically said, I for a couple of days I was involved. But other than that, I had a job, and it was almost like they pull them in when they need to talk to them, and they only tell them what they sort of need to know. But Bush would definitely been at the top because there was rumors that he had been seen at Area 51. There was all sorts of stories about the fact that he was the tough guy, and so he definitely knew. Bush himself. There's actually been, if you've seen the incident with Eric Davis. I don't know if you know the story about Eric Davis phoning me, and he wanted to talk to Jimmy Carter, and he asked me for Jimmy Carter's phone number, and I said, I don't have Jimmy Carter's phone number. I'm Canadian. I said, what do you want Jimmy Carter's phone number for? And he said, well, I want to talk to him about the Holloman Air Force Base film. And I said, really? And because there's always this rumor that they showed the Holloman Air Force Base to the president during his briefing. And I said, no, I don't have it. And then he said, well, I said, why are you asking? And he said, well, I talked to Ford and I talked to Bush. And he had talked to Ford about the briefing. He said, did you see the Holloman Air Force Base film during your briefing? And then Ford said, yes, I saw it. And then he said, well, when was the briefing? And he said, I'm never going to go there. Don't even bring up the subject. And then he said he talked to Bush Sr. And Bush Sr., and this is this need to know thing. He said, did you see the Holloman Air Force Base film? And he said, yes, I saw it, but not as president. I wasn't briefed as president on it. I was briefed as CI director. Now, he was only the CI director for Ford for 1 year, but he said that it was during that event where he was briefed. And the guy didn't know that he had not been briefed on this before. So he's briefing him on this. And he's talking about the craft lands, and it's all being filmed from 4 different angles and all that sort of stuff. And Bush said, what the hell are you talking about? What are you talking? What do you mean? And he was all sort of, and then the guy suddenly realized that he had not been briefed on it before. And so when Eric Davis asked him, he said, well, because there's always these stories that Bill Coleman was putting out that the cover story was it was a flame out of an A-12. That's what people were seeing. Or we had special lenses, therefore we couldn't let the Russians know. So that's why we didn't release it. And there was Bob Emmenegger talked about he was given 20 questions. So he said, I'll give you 20 questions. And Bob asked this question, that question about all this sort of stuff. And then he couldn't get it. And that's when Coleman said, I could take you out into the Gulf of Mexico. I could tell you what was going on and why we covered up the story, but then I have to kill you. And he sort of laughed. And so this is the deal where he asked Ford. He said, well, was it a flaming out of an A-12? No. Was it a psychological operation? No. Was it a training film? No. And he said, then Bush said to him, it was the real deal, and there was massive security surrounding it. And so
Mhm.
he knew, this thing were bits and pieces, but this indication where he was caught off guard as CI director when suddenly this guy gave him this briefing about what was going on. And he was sort of, by his reaction, this guy could tell he was shocked at what he was being told. And he didn't really know what was going on. But he did say when he was questioned by, there was a guy you may have talked to, he was a Republican guy. And they used to fly when the elections took place. They used to fly from Washington down back to Texas, and they would always stop in Fayetteville, North Carolina. And
Mhm.
Charles Huffer was the guy. So Charles Huffer was always there, and he had a tape recorder. And we've actually still got the audio tape. It's pretty badly taped, but anyway, he's in with Bush. He's in with Ford, and he walks out. Not Ford. He's in with Dick Cheney, And he walks in, and then Huffer says to him, "Are you going to release the UFO information?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "Yeah, we're going to do that. We're going to do that." And he walks in, and then he comes back and walking out, and he's with Dick Cheney. And then Huffer says to him, "So come on, you were CIA director. You know what's going on. Come on, you know." And he said, Oh yeah, I know a little. I know a lot." And then that was Bush Senior, but Bush Juniors had said to him as he came out of this facility where they were giving a speech or something. He said, "Oh, here's Dick Cheney. He knows what's going on. It's the first job he'll do when he gets to the White House." And of course, he didn't do it when he got to the White House. And that's why when he went on this radio talk show in Washington in April, so they came into power in the end of January. In April, I asked this question, April 11th. That's why I said, in all your jobs in government, have you ever been briefed? And that was this whole idea that said he was going to do it first day in the White House. And of course, he didn't do anything.
So, Grant, to what level was Ronald Reagan briefed, or was he?
Well, Ronald Reagan definitely was briefed because there was a couple of incidents uh, where the main one was and it's on tape is Steven Spielberg showing E.T. the extraterrestrial at the White House. And he shows the movie, and then Ronald Reagan, because Ronald had they put the theater in there, and so they're sitting there. And after he stands up, he says, uh, "Stephen, thank you for bringing E.T. the extraterrestrial to the White House. I just want to let you know that there probably aren't six people in this entire room that know how true the whole thing is." So
Well
we
done.
actually went. There was 39 people in the room, and it was like Bush Senior was there, Bush Junior was there, the ambassador to Great Britain was there, and we actually got the whole list of all the people that were there. But this indication that he knew, and you even had Colin Powell who talked about trying to his part of his job as chief of staff was to stop Reagan from talking about UFOs. And he said he would be in a meeting and Ronald Reagan would start talking about the ETs, and then he would have to sort of get the meeting back on track. And he said it was a terrible job. He said we'd be in all these meetings, and suddenly Ronald would start talking about aliens. And then Lucille Ball told the story that
Wow.
she believed that he was actually a contactee, that there was actually a landing in California they were having a cocktail party in Los Angeles. He was coming down from Sacramento with Nancy on the driving, and they came in an hour late. And people were asking him like, "What are you late for?" and all this stuff. And they said, "We saw this UFO on the road." And there was actually Steve Allen. Actually, there was two people confirmed it. Steve Allen confirmed it, and Lucille Ball confirmed it.
Really?
That they both were talking about this UFO that they had seen on the way down. And then later, Lucille Ball told Shirley MacLaine that Reagan had told her that it was actual encounter, that he'd actually encountered a being during this encounter, and the being had told him to run for president. And so I went to Shirley MacLaine's
Whoa.
webmaster, and I said to her, "This was quoted in a paper in Great Britain. Can you ask Shirley, did Lucille Ball actually tell her the story, or was this made up by the newspaper?" And it came back and said, "No, Lucille Ball actually told Shirley MacLaine this story."
That's very interesting. That's
And Lucille
very
Ball had said, she said in her biography, you look at her biography, she even talks about this, and she said, "I often wondered if people had known what had actually happened, whether people would have voted for Ronald Reagan."
so do you think, Grant, that Nancy Reagan took all this to heart and then influenced Ronald Reagan to run for president?
Yeah, Nancy was always seen as the power. She was
Yes,
the one
correct.
that was running the show there, and Ronald would do anything to make her happy. And
Yes.
there was when I was at the Reagan Library, I recovered because I knew she was into astrology and paranormal stuff, and there was 2,500 pages of articles of cartoons that had been done about Nancy Reagan and all this sort of stuff. That she was basically the one that was sort of pushing all this paranormal stuff and that Ronald was interested, and that's why he makes this famous speech about how the world would unite if faced with a threat from an alien race. And he brought it up, I think, five times or six times. It wasn't one time; it was a number of times. And this was the Colin Powell's job was to try to get this out of the speech. And we even have the one from the United Nations when he was giving this speech at the United Nations. I recovered the documents where the speechwriter actually pulls it out. He pulls out this thing about the threat from an alien race, and Ronald Reagan writes a letter back to the speechwriter, and he says, oh, he said, by the way, could you put my fantasy back in how we'd be threatened by an alien race? And it's actually in Ronald Reagan's handwriting because I went to the archivist. It's kind of weird. I went to the archivist. This is 5 minutes before they closed, and I was looking for Ronald Reagan's handwriting. And I looked at it. She said, no, that's not it. Here, here. And they've got a whole catalog of photocopy stuff from Ronald Reagan's signing. And she pulled it and she went to the alien invasion thing and she said, this is his writing. And I looked at it and went, whoa, let me get the photocopier before this place closes. And I photocopied this. But it was fascinating, this idea that that the indication was that the president is sort of in the loop as to what's going on. And you get the situation like if you look at one of the questions I would have for you is if you listen to Jim Semivan, who was the equivalent of a two-star general at the CIA, who was the guy who went to all the three-letter agencies just before the New York Times article came out and said, "You guys aren't going to do anything with this. We're going to drop this thing. We're not going to release classified information, but we're going to drop this thing." And he maintains up and down that this is a PED, a Presidential Emergency Action Document, and that the president is actually in charge of the whole thing. It's an executive program, which is why Congress is having so much time getting it, because they have no access to presidential emergency action documents, which would cover
Mm,
things like the presidential security. And I think there's only about 20 of them, and none has ever been declassified, which
okay.
gives the president the authorization in an emergency to say there may be an alien invasion. Therefore, these people are going to know, and nobody else is going to know. Congress doesn't have a need to know. And so that was one of the questions I had for you, this thing about the PED, where you look at it where you've got whatever it is, 15 administrations now, seven Democratic, eight Republican administrations, and everybody's done the same thing, which would indicate whoever's running the show, whether it's right or wrong, they think they're saving the world. And this is the idea that every president, whether Republican or Democrat, has basically played the game, kept quiet or kept a secret or didn't ask the question or whatever. So that's where I went after the presidential stuff. And you'd always get these indications. Yes, they knew a little bit, but it was a plausible deniability thing where they say, if there's a crash, if something happens, then we'll bring you in and we'll brief you. But you want the plausible deniability to stand there and say you really don't know what's going on, or you don't have any information.
Interesting, interesting. So it's covered by the Presidential Emergency Action then? A
Yeah,
lot of
that's what, and Semi Van has been interviewed a number of times, and he keeps insisting that this was, and he said that Eisenhower is the one that had signed it, the
okay.
Presidential Emergency Action Document. And I looked it up, and these are actual things that have never been declassified, and they're higher than an executive order. They're basically, and that's why he said that's why Congress is never going to get anything. You mentioned the thing about the security clearance, which is true. He said that they only got a secret security clearance. And the other problem is that you remember the Republicans wanted to get into SCIF, and they kept fighting, fighting, fighting to get into SCIF. That's the last thing you want to do is get into a SCIF because they went into SCIF, and of course, as soon as you walk into a SCIF, you got to sign the paper. It says, we're going to talk about this, and I'm under classification now. And then, of course, these guys get whatever they get inside the SCIF, and they walk out, and the reporters say, "So what did they tell you?" I can't tell you. It's classified. And then now you've got them. Even Danny Sheehan said I would never do that, but they got Danny Sheehan as well because Danny Sheehan would never go in the skiff and never take a security oath to know what's going on. But what happened to him? He talked about the one recovery where the craft was bigger on the inside than was outside, and
Yes.
it appeared that he shouldn't have talked about that. But the thing was that he was representing the government in terms of being a legal assistant, and that's when they said to him, if you want to stay in the loop on this thing, you got to quit talking about what you're told because you're a lawyer. And then suddenly Danny Sheehan started saying in interviews, "Oh, I can't talk about this, I can't talk about that." And this was this whole thing where they got him under the lawyer thing, where they find all these intricate ways to stop people from talking, and where even though they've got a little bit of the secret, they can't talk about it anymore.
Hmm. Just to review really quickly, Grant. So we are to believe that Lucille Ball confirmed this because she was at the dinner, she was at the cocktail party,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Now, did Nancy Reagan tell Lucille Ball this personally about Ronald Reagan?
I think Ronald Reagan told her. That's the story
Oh,
that
Ronald
was
Reagan
told to
told
me,
her.
that Ronald Reagan had told her directly that she was friends with Ronald Reagan and that Ronald Reagan had told her the story.
Wow. Do you think there's any paperwork or documentation that could verify that at all over at the library?
The person that would have it would be Brett Elders. Brett Elders was the one that confirmed to me from Shirley
Really?
MacLaine She may have Shirley MacLaine may have stuff. I contact Britt Elders. She's the one that confirmed it to me that this is
Interesting.
a true story because it appeared in this England newspaper. So I go, like the Daily Mail or whatever. You go like, hey, you never know they're going to make up a story or whatever. And that's what I said. It's in the paper. It did Shirley MacLaine actually say this? And then she came back and said, yes, this is real. Shirley actually confirmed this that she'd been
Interesting.
told this by Lucille Ball. So whether Shirley MacLaine's got any documentation, that's the place it would be.
Excellent. Excellent. Cindy,
Well,
this is, go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, the Brett Elder is the president of Shirley MacLaine's company, enterprise. I don't remember what it's called.
Yeah.
So,
And she runs her website too.
yeah, so Brett Elders definitely has solid information.
Yeah,
Okay.
I know she has stuff in a vault because I was trying to get a piece of the
Oh,
film
really?
from the 75 filming. There was a certain thing that happened to me. It happened to Brandon Fugel, and it happens on one of the films with what was the guy's name from Switzerland? The guy who was doing the filming there. Um,
Billy Meyer.
Billy Myers.
Billy Meyer, yeah. So I asked her and I said, "Can I see the film?" Because there was a claim that it had gone from one side of the film to the other side instantaneously. And I said, "This is really important, man. We got to see this film to confirm this." And she said, "The film's in a vault. Don't ever mention it. Don't go there." So it was like she's got a lot of material. I know what she's going to do with the stuff in the vault when she dies, but she is very very interested. She's been in it for many many years and very close to Shirley MacLaine, who I'm sure Shirley was told a lot of stuff because she was very good friends with Ronald Reagan. She not Ronald Reagan, Jimmy Carter. She'd actually campaigned for Jimmy Carter's son when he was running for Senate. And she had had conversations. She's the one that said that Jimmy Carter told her, "Yes, it's true. Why should we be the crash thing is true? Why should we be the only ones in the universe?" And Shirley MacLaine claimed that Jimmy Carter had told her that. So I'm sure even Shirley MacLaine writing it down or getting a confirmation would be advantageous because she's getting on in age, and they've documented a lot of this stuff. They just haven't really gone public with it. But Britt Elders and Shirley MacLaine are in that story, and it is also I think it's on. I don't have the audio anymore, but Steve Allen, who was a very big skeptic, he was an extreme skeptic. He
Mhm.
actually confirmed, yes, he didn't say the part about the encounter with the beings, but he definitely said, yes, they came in and they were really excited and they had to come in an hour late. And yes, this is, I think it was him that was hosting the cocktail party or something. So you have two witnesses that actually claim that, yes, they had some sort of event happen on the way into that cocktail party.
Interesting.
So this information just came. Shirley MacLaine's foundation. Shirley MacLaine has a foundation called the Shirley MacLaine Foundation. Brett Elders is the CEO of ShirleyMacLaine.com, Shirley MacLaine's official site. So Brett Elders knows a lot of secrets.
Oh, okay.
She's got to protect Shirley MacLaine at this point, but I didn't ask for any details. I just said, "Is this story true?" I mean, or is the New York, or is the British paper making up stories about Shirley MacLaine? And she said, and it came back a while later, a couple of weeks later, and said, "Yes, the story is true." Shirley told
Wow.
me it's true. So, yeah, there's a few people that have been around the president. That's what I tried to do is find people around the president who may have been told stuff, and people who had talked to Hillary Clinton and stuff like that, and there's a lot of evidence that they seem to know. And even though they promise that they're going to release it once they get in, it's like for Gerald Ford, for example. If you remember, Gerald Ford was furious as a congressman because all these sightings in Michigan had happened, and this big thing
Correct.
blew up with Jalen Hynek,
Right.
and it happened in his district. So he was under a lot of pressure, and that's when he said, "Not only should we get an investigation, we should put these military people under oath and force them to tell us what's going on." And when he became president, he never used the word UFO ever, not
Wow.
once. It was like it completely changed. It was like day and night. There's no indication that he ever talked. And after he left, then there was one letter where he said, I tried to get it as congressman, as vice president, as president, and I wasn't able to get anything. He said that, but that was after he left office.
They shut him down, Grant, right? They
Yeah,
shut him down.
he never used the word. It was almost like is that there's this joke that they tell that as soon as you come in as president, they put you in a room and the screen comes down and goes, and you see the Kennedy assassination from a new angle, and then they just go, any questions, Mr. President? That's
Uh-huh.
like,
Grant, really quickly, Grant, can you talk about Jimmy Carter's briefing and what his reaction was when he got the briefing?
yeah, that came down. That's why they were asking me that's why Eric Davis was coming to me about Jimmy Carter, because the guy that told that story is a Secret Service agent for
Okay.
the president, and he was telling the story that Jimmy Carter was devastated by it, that he was crying, and that he was, it had really, thrown him for a loop when he got the briefing. And Bill Moore had the supposed briefing document, this document that floated around in the 1980s and 1990s of this supposed briefing, Carter. But the thing was that it was in a documentary. It's at the National Security Archives in Washington. There's a it's um, a TV network, public. It's one of the TV networks, the public ones, where the guy tells a story where this security officer had told the story about Jimmy Carter crying, but he'd also said that the president, he was in the briefing, and that the president's briefing involved a 15-minute color film that was shown to him. And that is the Holloman Air Force Base story. That's why Eric Davis was going after him, was because the security guard story was running around. And then later the security guards played games. He was asked about it. And he said, well, no, I was never there. I was in Jimmy Carter's office and I spilled water on the carpet and Jimmy Carter was all upset with me. And he started telling all these bizarre stories that sort of didn't go anywhere. But we actually had the guy's Secret Service card. It's in that archives, National Security Archives, and this whole story. So it was this public TV network that was chasing this story, and they never went with it because they couldn't get anything to back it up. But all the background information from the reporters there questioning this guy and all this sort of stuff. And that's the whole idea, was that Jimmy Carter had gotten the briefing. That's what he told Shirley MacLaine. Yes, this is true. And same with the story that Jimmy Carter, Danny Sheehan tells, that Carter had gone in there and that Carter had done things through other people. So Jimmy Carter's fingerprints were never on anything, but he sent Jody Powell, who's his press secretary, to the FBI, forced the FBI to release 1,500 pages. He had a lawyer at the CIA who broke down crying because they were hiding documents from her, and she was putting pressure on it from Jimmy Carter to open that up. And he sent Press, who was his science advisor, down to NASA to get another investigation. And they said, you cut our budget. We haven't got any money for this. We'll investigate hardware, but we haven't got any money for this. So he was doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes. And one of the things he'd done was he asked Marcia Smith from the Congressional Service, the archives, to write a report on UFOs. And Danny Sheehan said he saw it before it went. He saw the classified version, and that it confirmed that there had been at least 5 races. This was all true. And this was sent to Jimmy Carter, and he had seen the Blue Book files that were used for this report. And he's the one that claimed that he saw the crash flying saucer with the Air Force guys in the snow where they're filming and all this sort of stuff. And he quickly gets the symbols off the side of the craft. He puts them under the screen and traces them, and then
Well
takes
done.
off on that sort of thing, which sort of confirms that if the Marcia Smith had that material, then the president had the material because she was doing the report for the president. When I contacted her, Danny Sheehan was very upset because I said, is this true? Is Danny Sheehan lying and stuff? And it came across like I was accusing Danny Sheehan of lying, but that was the question I put to her. And she was furious with Danny Sheehan that this story had gotten out about her doing this report for the president.
Grant, I have a question.
Yeah,
When you talk about this briefing that's given to the presidents,
yeah.
is it the exact same briefing or is it custom tailored per president?
I think it would be custom tailored to the president in terms
Okay.
of, like, like Donald Trump said he wasn't interested, and it wasn't until the Nimitz story got going that there was all this pressure, and then the Navy went in and briefed him on the Navy films. So yeah, that's where I think it may be this thing where the president doesn't need to know anything, everything. I was actually contacted when Donald Trump was briefed, and this is some of the problems I got with people having these stories about who's doing the briefing. So I was contacted by his biggest fundraiser in Pennsylvania, and he said, where are the bodies and crafts? I said, I have no idea what the bodies and crafts. What do you want to know that for? And he said, well, we're doing a briefing for Donald Trump. I said, you're doing a briefing for Donald Trump? He said, yeah, we're going to give it to his first, now his name's going to jump my mind here, his first national security advisor, or no, chief of staff. And
Okay.
he said, and I said, well, why aren't they going to tell him? And he said, no, they won't tell him. I said, who are they? And he said, well, the people that are running it. And I said, well, who's the people running it? I said, number one, if President Trump gets in, which he's actually done in his last administration, he fires the CI director, he fires the NSA guy, he's hiring everybody. So no matter who you've got all the president's people. And if he doesn't like their attitudes or their loyalty or whatever, he fires them and he gets down to somebody who's going to tell him the truth. And so if the president gets in, he hires all the people, and those people don't tell him what's going on. Well, then who's to blame? So there's going to be almost like, what do they call it? The person that would give the briefing would be um, what's the name they have for it when they do the briefing? Subject matter expert, which
Okay.
Semivan talks about. So you can have a subject matter expert, and the person I think that definitely is part of it is Ron Pandolfi. And I don't know if you've dealt with Ron Pandolfi. I got the emails going between him and Kit Green, and they're talking about the briefing given to Senator Reid. And a guy by the name of, he was known as the Condor. It was Robert Collins wrote, and he said, he didn't get briefed. They wouldn't have briefed Reid, not like Hillary Clinton. And Kit Green was on the email, and Kit Green came back and said, no, in fact, he was briefed. And then Ron Pandolfi comes on the email, and he says, well, you got to know what it means to be briefed. Briefing isn't, it's a place that holds the information. And he said, all the requests, I can actually send you the email. He said, the requests I get seems like from congressmen and people like that. I tell them, I can show you where it is, but you got to remember that you can get into a lot of trouble with this kind of stuff. I hold the keys. And he said, when I give them that thing and tell them how much trouble they can get in, they all say, well, you hold the keys. And he was the guy that when you remember back in the Rockefeller days with the Clintons, where Rockefeller was coming to the White House and they blocked them from getting to the president because you don't want him getting to the president. So they blocked them both the science director, Dr. Gibbons. And so Dick Gibbons knows nothing about UFOs. So of course he asked for a briefing and he goes to the CIA and the briefing is given to Ron Pandolfi. So Ron Pandolfi cannot do a briefing for the science advisor because he knows it's all going to go public. Rockefeller's is all going to be public. Everybody's going to know. And then the CIA is in trouble of giving a briefing when they said there's nothing to it. So what he does is he gives it to Bruce Maccabee, who you probably knew. And Bruce Maccabee says to Bruce, you got till 8 o'clock tomorrow morning to make a briefing for the science advisor to the president. So Bruce is putting all these attachments and he's doing this whole briefing thing. And he goes the next morning and he brings it to the executive building there out beside the White House. And the briefing's already taken place. It had been moved up an hour and he'd been given another briefing. But the briefing there, we know for that would be the subject matter expert that he needed it, and it went to Ron Pandolfi, and so that's what I think. And when I asked Ron, I've talked to Ron a little bit in the last couple of months. I usually don't engage these people, but I was talking to him about being hypocritical, that he was doing one thing and he was preaching one thing and doing another. And then he said, I've been friends with Donald Trump for 10 years. Um, um, I can't say anything bad about him, but in a month, maybe I'll be free, which was he was hinting that he might be retiring, which would indicate that he might be able to talk at that point. But this has always been the rumor that people like Ron Pandolfi, and he's been around since '83 at the CIA. He knew Ronald Reagan very well, and that he is the guy that controls the classified material. So anybody that wants has to go through him in terms of, do you have a need to know? Do you have the proper security clearance? Because if you remember the story that's now been confirmed, I told the story years ago that Jim Semivan had the encounter with the beings in his room. And the story that I was told by a very close friend of Semivan's that is, it was the same guy that asked for the briefing. He was the top fundraiser for Donald Trump in Pennsylvania. And he told me the story. He said when Jim Semivan had that encounter with the beings in the room, he went to CIA the next day and he went to Ron Pandolfi. He said, I had these beings in my room last night. I need to know what's going on. And Ron says, you don't have a need to know. He said, I don't have a need to know. You bring your boss's boss in here. We'll see who doesn't need to know. So according to my story was they brought in Tenet and Tenet said, leave it alone. Pretend it's a one-off. Pretend it'll never happen again. Don't touch it. It'll ruin your career. And this is his idea. Like, we'll tell you if you need to know, we'll drag you into it. And then the story I was told was that when he left in the CIA in 2008, he was brought into Ron's office and Ron actually gave him the briefing. And Ron actually told him what was going on. And Semi Van confirms he knows what the legacy programs are. He knows all about it. He's not going to talk about it. He got a 7 hour briefing and he said they scared the living daylights out of him inside the CIA. And the people that gave him the briefing would be the subject matter experts. He said these guys had as many clearances as I had, and they were scientists and they were contractors and they were allowed to walk around the CIA without an escort. And he said these were very powerful guys. And they said after the first briefing, they said, "Do you want another briefing?" And he said, "No, I've seen enough. I don't want another briefing." And then Jack Valet confirmed the fact that when he had the encounter with these beings, he went to Ron Pandolfi and asked him what was going on. So that's the thing, is it's sort of out of the loop that they have these people that are in control of the information that have been there for years. And if the president needs to know something, they'll tell him. And if he doesn't need to know, they give him the plausible deniability of because you have the situation, where with Donald Trump right now is in a situation where he's got this scandal, a sex scandal going on. The last thing he wants to do is step up and throw the UFO into the middle of this thing and have people starting to point and say, you're responsible for this. That if somebody comes up and proves that it's a presidential emergency action document, well, then Trump's in charge of the whole thing. And does he want to put himself in that position of trying to defend all the secrecy that's gone on, people have been killed or whatever has gone on for 80 years.
Mhm, mhm. Grant, really quickly, during the very early Reagan buildup, 81 to 86 timeframe, if we talk about the early Reagan defense buildup, the stealth program was run out of a vault on the 5th floor of the Pentagon's D ring. Do you believe the legacy programs were still stored there at that time, or have they been moved out of classified category and brought over to the defense contractors and are now in a proprietary category?
Okay, the one story that I've got, I'm not too sure about the answer to your questions, but the one story I did get, and George Knapp tells this story, and I think it was in that time period, 82, was
Yeah.
this idea that material had been moved from Wright-Patterson Air Force Base into Area 51. And that one of the 6 witnesses, remember, you had the 6 witnesses, and they were all threatened one after another. They're going to go on camera, and then he was upset, not so much because they threatened the witnesses, but because his phone was tapped. It was very obvious. They knew who the next interview was going to be, and they went and threatened these people. And the one woman was a stenographer who claimed to have been taking notes during the crossover when they were moving this stuff into Area 51. And the date is in my head is 82 or somewhere in that range when this happened. And that they when she was going to go and testify to go on camera, she got a visit from these guys that said, "You realize you're still under a security oath. We don't want anything to happen. We know you visit your daughter in Los Angeles, and we'd hate to have something happen in the desert." And George Knapp said, it's like 20 years later, she still won't talk to him. She's still petrified this woman's still around, but she was a stenographer that was involved in these meetings. So yeah, the 80s, they would be moving this stuff all over the place because you heard the story, oh, you know the story of um, um, Jackie Gleason. And that story I believe is
Absolutely.
true because it was a guy that did the interview for me, talked to Jackie Gleason's second wife. And she's the one that confirmed, yes, something happened. He was either running around with a woman or something happened because he was like white as a ghost when he came home after he saw this whole event. And I think that story is true. And I think they've sort of moved this stuff all over the place. And you may have different facilities where they're keeping it. But I always remind people that, and you probably know this fact, that Eric Davis points this out, that if you got a security class, a black program, that they spend 10 times the money on security as they do for the program. So I say to people, when you're looking at all this material that's floating around, you got to remember that there's what's the disinformation, what's the stuff they're using that you're running up against these guys who've done this for 80 years, and they're absolutely experts at how do you classify the material you've got because there's so much money put into keeping it secret that it
Yeah.
doesn't make any sense that some guy's just going to walk out and tell you what's going on. Because I had that thing. It was actually one of Pandolfi's associates phoned me up one time and said, "Oh, I got a phone call from you. I know I got a message from U.S. intelligence to talk to you." And I said, Are you kidding me? Come on. Do you realize I'm a Canadian? Like, you think I'm stupid? They asked to talk to me, and it was about they wanted to do this movie on the aviary. But this is the whole deal is that there's so much of this stuff going on that the UFO community, I think, seems to ignore is the fact that there's all these protections around the program. And I think one of the protections might be that they move this stuff all over the place. And the
Yeah,
last place you'd figure they're going to have it. Like one of the stories I heard that we're trying to track down now that maybe you know about is they're talking about this Navy base on the East Coast. Where the Navy guy is an engineer, I believe. Jack Sarfatti tells the story. I can send you that story. And he claims that this guy told him this story, the same sort of story you told about getting the diamond drills and they couldn't get inside. And there's this story that's told by James Lukatsky in the George Knapp interview where he says in 2011, we had this meeting in a congressional facility, which means it's in a congressional skiff. And he said, we had this meeting and there was a senator involved. So people say, well, the senators aren't read in, but there's a senator was in this meeting. And of course, it was now confirmed it was Senator Reid that was in the meeting. And he said, and we made the announcement that we'd gotten inside the craft. And this is this whole idea that Sarfati was telling the story is that the craft, if it's sealed off, you can't get in the craft. You can't use a diamond drill. You can't get in. That the craft is conscious, and unless you have the right mindset, you ain't. They don't know they're going to open the door. The craft is got its own free will, and it'll open the door. And Sarfati's story was, and he said this, he's 99% sure this guy who is at this facility on the East Coast told him that he'd gotten inside the craft and he'd flown it inside the hangar. And then we looked at this whole thing, and there's a facility that Lou Elizondo talks about in one. I think it's in a congressional hearing. He talks about this one facility, and I believe is the same facility. It's a Navy facility on the East Coast near Washington, D.C. So there's all this stuff, but I think I give you credit for being able to sort this stuff out because when you take a look at it, there's a lot of stories
sure.
going around, and then you got to realize is it because that's what I believe they do. Like with the Holloman Air Force Base story, I was good friends with Bob Emenegger. I was always told that it was 1971. May 1971 was when this landing thing occurred. That was all filmed and stuff like that. And then Richard Doty comes out and said it was 64. And so everybody started saying it was 64. And I said, no, it's 71. And so then you get me and Linda Howe and all these people, and everybody's fighting about when it's a 64 or 71. And that's what they'll do is they throw mud in the water. They put a second story out that's
Sure.
similar to the first story, and it throws off you and I. And so I give you credit to be able to sort this stuff out and, have people realize that whether we've got the story exactly right, there's absolutely something going on here.
Yeah, yeah. We're all a family here. We're all fighting for the same crusade.
Yeah, yeah. And that eventually they're going to be forced in a position that they're going to have to do something because I believe there are people behind the scenes like Semivan who are pushing the narrative. In fact, Lakatsky said, if you remember the interview, Lakatsky said, me and Colm Kelleher are experts at taking highly classified material and lowering it down to lower classifications. So they asked him in this whole thing, they said, oh, what about what's inside the craft? What's inside the craft? And then they cut him off. They started talking over him. And he basically said, if you knew what was inside the craft, you'd realize that the whole rest of the story, whole rest of the book is primitive. And this whole idea, he said, well, maybe I'll get it into the next book. So what Lakatsky's doing is he's going to the Dopser and he's putting this material in front of Dopser, and they're allowing him to tell these stories indirectly. So he keeps putting new stories out. The same as Lou Elizondo. When you first heard Lou Elizondo come out, he wasn't saying anything. I can't talk about this. I can't talk about that. I got a security clearance. They're watching me and all this sort of stuff. And the next day he pops another story out about something they'd never talked about before. And then suddenly, the crafts are real. We've got crash material. Somebody's watching over him. Somebody's telling him what to say, what not to say.
Yeah.
And I believe they're indirectly telling the stories through these people because Elizondo is a completely different guy than he was when he first came out. He's talking about all sorts of stuff, orbs in his house and all this sort of stuff that he never would have talked about when he first came out.
Wow, okay.
I feel like possibly Ron Pandolfi and whoever these people are that can walk in CIA without any badges or answer to anybody. I feel like these are the residues of the MJ-12 that was put together back in Truman days. Is it
Yeah, I
Truman?
think Michael will agree that there's got to be if you look at the government. I mean, you've done archives, so if you go into government archives, it's like piles of paper, more paper you can ever possibly. The Eisenhower Library, when I found out they only had 5 UFO documents, I said, five? I said, how many pages of documents you got in here? And he said, 28 million pages. I said, you only got 5 on UFOs? Because I thought, oh, well, the president would know everything about everything. And that's the whole story is that the government will always have a procedure. They'll always have layers of paperwork, and you got to this permission, that permission, all this sort of stuff. That they would have these protocols that are very, very hard for them to change. Almost like you get the idea, that the Navy was running the program because there was no U.S. Air Force in 1947 and 1946, 45. So the
Mhm.
Navy had the crash recover stuff.
Yes,
And when the Air
correct.
Force comes in, they say, okay, we're going to take over the crash recovery stuff. And they say, you and whose army are you going to, you're not taking care of, because we've got all the research money. The Navy had all the research money in 46 and early 47. So they're not going to give up the research money. And so that's why you have, the Navy has its own Air Force and all this sort of stuff where you have all this duplicate programs because it's this agencies fighting with each other. And the whole story that I was told by the Canadians when I asked them who the Canadians were dealing with, and they said, we were not sure, but it was Navy people. And this is this whole story that the Navy, it's like the thing they hide it in the Navy, like the Bob Lazar thing, where he's telling the story about the Navy was this, Navy that, and the last place you'd expect it to be would be in the Navy. So you're looking in the Air Force, and they've moved to someplace else, and that's why I
Right.
say to people, the warning I always give is they've done this counterintelligence protecting secrets for 80 years. They know what they're doing. They've had a lot of practice. Be very careful what you're doing. Is that these guys are? If this is, you agree with me, this is the biggest story that's ever going to come down the pike.
Absolutely.
And
No
they
doubt
are going
about
to
it.
do everything they can to stop this story from coming out or control it. I think more controlling the story, where they want to control a narrative. They want to get out in front of you, which is the Chase Brandon story. If you remember the 2012 Chase Brandon story, and now I hear that Chase Brandon wasn't even the guy's name. It was a different name, and he was the Hollywood guy. So if you were doing a UFO movie in Hollywood, they'd come, hey, you're doing a UFO movie in Hollywood, yeah, and you're talking about the CIA, yeah. Have you ever been to the CIA? No. Hey, maybe I could take you to the CIA. I'm in the CIA. I'll take you for a tour of the CIA, and then you'd better have a better objective view of what's going on. And they get in front of you and they start to direct you as to what to do. And they give you free planes and Navy facilities and stuff like that. And they get control of the narrative. That's what they want to do, is get out in front of it. Because in order to kill you, that just makes it worse. So what you do is you want to control the program. You want to get in control of the people who have got the story and direct them in the direction you want them to go.
Mhm.
I kind of feel like, I guess it's global, but for sure the US, like bunch of people with their heads cut off. Where's your duty and courage? I don't understand why somebody doesn't secretly hold a press conference and be the
Okay.
hero to
Okay. I can
come out.
answer that.
Okay.
Uh, Barack Obama was in an interview with Kimmel, and he said, Kimmel asked him, he said, did you, when you got there and you pretended to the Bible, he said, did you go and find the secrets? And then he said, no. And he said, that would be the first thing I would do. And that's Barack Obama says, that's why you'll never be president. It's the whole idea is you play the game. And that's why I say to people, that's what you got to remember. There's been 15 administrations and everybody goes in there and they're going to change the story and everybody does the same thing, which means that when you get in there, when they give you the briefing, you're either so scared about what's going to happen to you if you break the briefing, or you suddenly goes, oh, that's what's going on. Oh, okay, I see what's going on. The Russians are working on it, and they're going to deep six us or whatever. But everybody's done the same thing, which would indicate that when you get in there, all the people at the top all believe that they're doing the right thing. Otherwise, you'd have a defection, and there really are no defections from presidents and stuff, except to sort of make hints and stuff like that. But everybody plays the game once they're in there, and whether it's the power of the threat or whether it's you suddenly understand what's going on or whatever. But it doesn't matter who it is. Everybody plays the game.
But I think it's always really hard in life in general to do the right thing. To do the right thing sometimes it's really hard because I would think, if this information gets out, many of our illnesses could get some answers and we can get off fossil fuel, free energy, religion could be rewritten. In my opinion, there's a lot of benefit for this information to come out. We
Yeah, and
need
that's what Eric Walker said when we talked to Eric Walker, who was good friends with Eisenhower, and ran he was chairman of the board of the Institute for Defense Analysis, top military think tank. He made a number of points, and I didn't realize in 1990 when he gave the interviews, it wasn't until 30 years later I figured it out. But he said it's just curiosity, admit it. So for you and I and Michael, we can see the benefits of this, where it's going to go. But for the average person, if you say name the 100 top things in your life that you're concerned about, UFOs would not be on the top 100 for anybody. I mean, it's like it's interesting, people like it, but they're not going to sacrifice their life to go and do the UFO thing. It's people who've had sightings and people who've suddenly encountered it or encountered witnesses where you suddenly get sort of dragged into it. But he said, admit it, it's just curiosity. And the other thing he said, it's been 40 years. And he gave this interview in 87. He said, it's been 40 years and we haven't blown up the world yet. So what's the big deal? And it's like, we're in control of this thing. And then he said, go study something else. You're up against the windmills. Unless you have the mind of Einstein, you're wasting your time. That this thing is just not, it's not worth it. He kept saying, he was screaming in the phone at one time, leave it alone, leave it alone. He's just, and this is the thing that this guy could have gone. We said to him, you're an old man. Come on, you can release the story. You know what's going on. You worked with Bush he was behind the cover up. He said, when he talked about the MJ-12, he said, yeah, I know all those guys. And he knew the whole thing. And he said, you're up against the windmills. Leave it alone. There's nothing you can do. And he was screaming in the phone. And he said, don't do this. Don't, it's not worth it and stuff like that. And that's what we get into this thing is that, like in the president administration, how many people in the president administration have, gone up against Trump? It's like, when it gets there, the president will put his people that he trusts in there. And if he doesn't trust you, you're gone. He moves you out of there because he wants his agenda done, and that most people just don't have the will. They will, they need a job or they're afraid for their kids. I mean, if they came to you and said, if you talk Cindy, we're not going to kill you, we're going to kill your kids. Because that's what they did to that woman with this stenographer. They didn't threaten her. They said hate to have an accident in the desert, and they were talking about her daughter. This whole idea where they can threaten your kids. So we don't know what. Maybe Michael has some indications from the witnesses as to what they were told and why that's always a question I have for Michael is how did these people actually come forward? Because it takes a lot of, if you got the top secret material, it takes
Right.
a lot of chutzpah to come forward and put your life on the line.
Yeah, this came from multiple sources that Leonard identified, and it was like a gravity mass. The more people that came to him, the more witnesses kept coming toward him because they knew that they could trust him to keep their names under wraps. That's how Leonard was able to get all the contacts.
Yeah, because that always surprised me with him because I think you can give me how many he had, 200 or 300. And I remember when I talked to him, he had a lot then, and I'm thinking to myself, I really haven't got one. I got these two women later. They're from
Yeah, right.
Ohio. I got them, but I said I haven't got one. This guy's got 200. Are they feeding this stuff to him? Which was always an indication that I had that maybe they're actually feeding him witnesses and helping him tell the story in terms of because it was so strange that most people don't have one or two witnesses that
I
are,
know.
with crashes, and suddenly this guy's got 200 of them, and either he's a really good researcher, or as you said, like people trusted him. But I always wondered about how he had so many
Well,
witnesses. It's just
when
incredible.
he developed his organization and he got 8,000 letters on the first week,
Yeah.
he developed a network of UFO researchers, and people came to those researchers who came to Leonard. So he spread his net out very wide, which is definitely part of how he got the information.
Yeah, yeah, he had an incredible.
Yes.
I remember, as you pointed out, and that was an incredible conference where he first went public. Because people always make the mistake; they think this has always been around. People don't realize the Roswell. Nobody knew about Roswell before 1980, and nobody knew about crash saucers before because they'd had the whole scandal in the 50s with the Aztec crash where
Correct.
it'd been ridiculed and everybody just sort of went away and nobody talked about crash flying saucers until Len came forward. And then the big one was um, uh, Moore writing with Berlitz. And Moore said directly it wasn't him, it was Berlitz, because Berlitz had a big name. That's why the book was so big. That's why so many copies. And so that helped us move along. Did you ever deal with Bill Moore?
No,
And
I
what
did
did he
not.
think of your research?
No, I
No?
did not. Nope, didn't
Yeah.
deal with him.
I remember at the end when he left after 89, I was going to California. I said, Bill, I'd like to do an interview with you when I get to California. He said, Grant, I didn't figure it out. Give it up. You're not going to figure it out either.
Really? Really?
That was
Huh.
Bill. I never
Okay.
figured it out. You're not going to figure it out. So, yeah, it's an incredibly, and as you said, I mean, it's incredibly important that people realize there are actual, and now they're admitting it because you got Semivan will actually admit, Lou Elizondo will admit, Lakatsky will admit, they're all clearly saying, yes, there are bodies and crafts. And people say, there's going to be the panic thing, and it's almost like the 2017 New York Times article. I wrote an article in 2011 said the 64 reasons they've decided not to tell you the truth, and had all these reasons why they're never going to tell you the truth. And then in 2017, they all came out and said, "Oh yeah, the government is researching UFOs. They're real, and they're researching UFOs." And none of those things happened. It's like everybody said that people jump off bridges, the stock market meltdown. Nothing happened. It's going to be the same thing, I believe, with the crash saucer thing. Is everybody
Wow.
thinks there's going to
Okay.
be a big panic, and I'm pretty sure it's going to be the same thing as the 2017. Everybody's going to go because they're acclimatizing people. They're going to go,
Correct.
yeah, I knew that already. Yeah, what's the big deal? And it's like, yeah, we know that already. And so it's just a matter, and I think that's what Lukatsky's doing. Now he's talking about this new book coming out, and I don't know where he's going to go with it, but I mean, he was the guy that ran the big OSAP program and basically said all UFOs are different and said a bunch of bizarre things that sort of went over everybody's head. But the thing with the craft was extremely important, where he said if you knew what was inside the craft, you'd realize that the whole rest of my book is totally primitive, as if this thing is almost what Walker said. This, unless you have the mind of Einstein, you're never going to figure this thing out. It's just so complex. The more you look at it, it gets more complex and more complex.
Mhm.
I feel that it's really a courage issue, and I also feel that we tend to think small, like, this may be, I don't know, for lack of better words, to call it controversial. They would say, okay, go ahead and talk, we'll go after your children. And I think if we truly understand metaphysically and consciousness that our earthly lives are very transitory, that it's the greater service of goods,
Mhm.
service to others, and that our home is not the home that we go home to every single night. Our home is the planet. The planet is suffering because all the stuff we're doing, we really need help from advanced civilization. That's why I think this subject is so important and I'm passionate about, and I want to spread the knowledge. I think we need to think broader, think bigger, and understand that we're all connected.
Yeah.
That, you just got to think bigger, is my opinion.
Yeah, and that's true. Michael, let me ask you about your
Yeah.
your family in terms of you've done this for a lot of years. Have you
Sure.
gotten support from your family? Because I know my son actually told me to stop at one point, and this is
Mm,
maybe a year ago where I was dealing with Ron Pandolfi, and he sent me a picture of his wife with an AR-15, and he said she knows how to take care of loons. And I contacted him back and said, "Hey, Ron, some of my friends and relatives think you might kill me. What do you say to that?" And he didn't respond. But there was actually in the back of my house. This was Chinese New Year, I think it was. And I thought it was fireworks, but it was like two gunshots going off. And my kid came downstairs, and I was in the bathroom. Yeah, I couldn't hear him. And he came, he said, "Dad, Dad, Dad." And he comes out, and he's just panicking. And he said, "Oh, you're still alive." And I said, "Yeah, I'm still alive." And I said, Do you hear those gunshots?" And I said, "That may have been fireworks." He said, "No, I've heard guns. That's gunshots." And then I said, "Yeah, I heard him. I actually looked out the window the second time." And he said, "You better tell your friends that I live on the upstairs. I mean, it's fine for you, but I'm living here with your grandson upstairs, and they're not going to know." And he was basically telling me, you're getting us all in trouble here." So I just wonder what your kind of reaction with people
my
around you
family's
is.
aware of what I do, but it's just not a part of their interest. It's not a part of their personality profile, so they just don't have an interest in it, and
Yeah,
that's okay. That's all right.
and I
I,
think that's the pattern. I think that's the pattern.
I wouldn't say not interested, they're asleep.
Maybe so. Maybe so.
Yeah, they're asleep,
Mhm.
like my family.
But then if we see ourselves as this opportunity, because to me it's always like the Super Bowl that we got to play this game. We're on the leading edge of reality and what's really going on here. We've got a great opportunity, and it's up to us. It doesn't really matter what anybody else does. It's you've got the secret. what are you doing with the secret? Are you actually doing something with it or hiding it? Like the idea, you're collecting, I'd say for a lot of people, they're collecting stamps or collecting, coins or whatever. Because when I leaked the Wilson leak document and the alien autopsy document and the Johnson UFO study and the notes from the Advanced Physics Theoretical Working Group, and I'm saying, has anybody else released the document yet? It's like because I knew that when I released the Wilson leak document, I got a lot of flack for it. But then I realized that later on, I realized there was at least 5 or 6 major researchers who had the document for 10 years. And they'd sat on the
Okay.
document and not done anything with it. And it's
Okay.
sort of like, why do I have to release everything? Why do I have to leak everything? Well, because people they're keeping it. And that's one of the problems. Len, and maybe a question for you. Have you ever seen Len's files? Have they straightened that out? Because,
Well, the 65 three-ring binders are under the jurisdiction of MUFON at this time. I did see those at the Lunken Airport near Cincinnati. This was back in 2013. But there is still original files out there. The original names, addresses, phone numbers, that is still out there. Now, I did speak to a family member, and what he told me is that whatever Leonard wanted published, they had published, the rest was thrown out. And I believe the gentleman was being honest with me. I don't think he was lying. However, maybe he was trying to set me off and trying to get me to go in another direction, and maybe that stuff still exists, but my impression was the guy was telling me the truth.
wow. That's my big fear is that's
I
why I
know.
put almost all my stuff online. Where's your material going when you finally
I've got my material scanned in, double redundancy backup, so I think we're good there. But basically, I just want to preserve an important part of our national history. I think
yeah,
this is something that we should be aware of. It's being talked about in circles all around now, not
yeah.
only just congressional hearings, but it's everywhere now. And what you just mentioned, Grant, that there was no panic, there was no fear. We've been acclimated. The slow drip process has done its course. It's done its job. We're ready for it now at this point.
Yeah, yeah, I
Yep.
would agree with that.
That's
But
great.
but your material, have you got it going like when you die? Have you got it going to a library? Because my big fear was that because my son's really not interested. I mean, he's not against it, but he's
Yeah.
not
Yeah.
interested. And I knew that if I died, everything was going to go in the garbage. I mean, it's my whole life,
I
and
I
it's an
will
important story.
probably I will probably donate it to the National UFO Historical Record Center in Rio Rancho, New Mexico.
Beautiful.
Yep.
Beautiful. That's what we need to do is catalog this stuff because
Yep.
500 years from now, I told Cindy this story is like if you're doing reincarnation research or whatever, it's like 500 years from now, they're gonna regress Cindy and she's gonna say, "Oh, I used to be Cindy Ball," and they say, "Oh yeah, sure, everybody was Cindy. Yeah, everybody thinks Cleopatra and Cindy Ball. Everybody one or the other, because you're gonna be people if your story is recorded." People are going to look back and think we lived at the time of Jesus or the time of the signing of the Constitution or something. Like, boy, those people were
Mhm.
so lucky. They were there when it was really going on. And that's why I try to say to people, you got to realize you're on
Right.
top of this story, and then you take it more seriously in terms of what you've got and getting the story out. It doesn't help. It's like the biblical story is what profit the man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul. What good does it do if you and I and Cindy all figure this all out, but we don't do anything with it? If we just keep it in the
Right.
basement, it's not going
Correct.
to go anywhere.
Well, I like to inspire anyone who's watching. There's a Disney movie called A Bug's Life. Hopper, I think, is the villain character, and then millions of ants. In order to overcome Hopper, it's boots on the ground, all
Hmm.
of us who have the courage to spread the word. So I always talk about UFO reincarnation, spiritual stuff, conscious stuff at parties, on airplanes, and anyone who would have an interest, even if they don't, I plant seeds.
Good.
So I think those of us who are anyone watching who are like us, it is your job to help raise consciousness.
You're bold, Cindy. You're bold. I appreciate that.
No, it's like I feel like we're all ants. It's boots on the ground. You reach one person at a time, and together, and that's how we make a difference. I mean, I think forget about going from here from the West Coast to New York. How about on Airbnb? The question was asked, where would you like to travel? And I said, to other universe. To me, that's really, really exciting to have the ability to be able to go to another universe and meet some of my galactic brothers and sister friends.
Wonderful.
Question for Michael. Why do you think the intelligence is covering up, and why do you think they're crashing? Which is two totally different
Couple of
stories.
reasons. Number one, uh, it is very clear at this point that there's a rogue group within the military industrial complex that are targeting, tracking, and shooting these things down for their propulsion system and weapon systems exploitation.
Yeah.
And then the other part of your question is, going back to Timothy Good, this subject was classified higher than the atomic bomb during World War II. It was classified above top secret. And so that's how Timothy got the name of his book, Above Top Secret. We're talking about the varsity team here. We're talking about the crown jewels, and they are not going to let this go easily. It's going to be a fight. It's going to be a fight.
Yeah. But what are the aliens? Why do you think the aliens or ETs or whoever it is are not just landing on the White House lawn and telling
Yeah.
us what's going on?
Good question. Good question. Maybe they don't think we're consciously aware up to spec yet. Maybe they don't think we're mature enough yet, because we keep on greeting these ET civilizations and conscious with an open gun instead of open arms.
Yeah.
Got a lot of cases within different files, within APRO files, where we're shooting first and asking questions later. There are cases there. People are drawing guns first. Maybe that's the greeting that we're giving them. We're not spiritual enough to handle consciousness and the contact until we get to that level. Maybe that's what's going on.
Well, I like to add to that. I think there's elements of free will involved, and it's almost like my house is a mess. Do I really want you guys to come in, or do you really want to come in and help me clean my house? Really, it's my responsibility. So
Right.
that's why I go back to what I just said before. Those of us who are awake and who understands the subject, it is our job to educate.
Sure.
We do our best, because a lot of times, more often than not, when I start speaking about it, you see the head tilt back, eyes rolling. But I think to myself, okay, at least I plant the seeds. Like, one thing I do often when I'm at the airport, or if I'm on a plane, and I encounter a pilot, I always said, so have you seen a UFO? So I get that subject open, because it needs to be talked about. It needs to be everyday conversation.
And what do the pilots say?
I've only had one. I feel, and this is my intuition, most of them, when I asked, they're afraid to talk. But in this setting, this is at my daughter in son-in-law's house, and they had a friend who is a Southwest pilot. So it was during dinner. I said, so have you ever seen a UFO? And he's like, well, not really. However, every time we fly from California to Hawaii, that stretch of water, we see lights that can't be explained, and we don't know what it is, and it's not showing up on radar.
Okay.
So his wife immediately said, it's UFO.
Michael, question in terms of that, did I give you the Bashar version of the story? The Chandler Bashar said, why would we land when everybody's got a gun, and why would we land when everybody's crazy and has a gun?
Yeah, that's true. That's
Yeah,
true.
but that's not us.
I
Well,
know.
it's for the public. I remember I
I
had
know.
I had an interview with Art Bell. It was the guy started Coast to Coast, and Art Bell says to me, he says, "I will assure you, I will shoot them as they come off the craft." It's like, okay, whatever.
Art Bell said that?
Art Bell said that to me.
Why would he say that?
Well, he thought they were bad guys. Always thought they were bad guys. He was arguing with me, and that's when he said, "I'll tell you, Mr. Cameron, I will shoot them all as they come off the craft." Okay, whatever. Well, Michael, let me ask you about 2026, 2027. You've heard this whole scenario.
Yeah, I've
Have
heard
you
of
gotten
it.
into this whole
But
thing about?
tell us what's going on. What's the date and what's going to happen?
You're asking me. Well,
Yes.
the whole first one is Chris Bledsoe, who's a prime experiencer, says that he was told that something's going to happen on Easter morning on
Really?
2026 at the
Okay.
pyramids. And I asked him, I
Yeah.
said, "So are you going to be there?" And he said, "Yeah, me and my team are going to be there." So I was thinking, well, maybe we'd get some bunch of people, but there wasn't much interest that I've gotten much people that figured they wanted to go and sit there and see that. But 2027, Lou Elizondo's mentioned it. There's all these claims that military people have mentioned this 2027 thing,
Okay.
that there's going to be some sort of landing or some sort of disclosure. I mean, I just don't see it in this environment right now. I mean, we're having a hard time with people who are alien supposeds, that illegal aliens. And I always say to people, do you think that a Republican administration is going to allow these people to walk the streets of America, graze reptilians, and open businesses and make cars for $5,000 that can go to Mars for the weekend and stuff like that? It's like,
Hmm.
so I don't know. I just can't see it in this environment. I can see it
Okay.
more like you're talking about, where it's going to be forced out of them, where Congress has gotten a hold of this thing and they just keep hammering and hammering and hammering away, and
Right.
they get more and more disclosures and raise the consciousness where everybody suddenly realizes it's going on. And then it
Mhm.
won't be so bad if they have to make some sort of disclosure announcement and say, yeah, we have bodies and crafts. I don't think anything will happen.
Okay. Wow.
Somebody
Interesting.
needs to have balls.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Well, there's people that are pushing it. Like Michael is openly, you're openly saying it. I'm openly saying it.
Right.
And people will say, this threat thing. And I always say, people say threat. And I said, well, I went after the president. I went after the high level CIA people like Ron Pandolfi. I mean, if anybody was going to get knocked off, I mean, it should be me. And I'm a foreigner, so they don't even have to get permission. I don't have any rights like an American has rights. I have no rights whatsoever. And I've never been threatened except by one UFO researcher. And so I say to people that the threat is overplayed in terms of, if you really got some classified material, they'd come to you and say, you have a security clearance and we're going to get you on that. But in terms of killing people, that's what Jim Semivan had said to Chris Bledsoe, because Chris Bledsoe was upset because all these military people were around him all the time. And
Mm.
he said, if we wanted you dead, you'd be dead 10 years ago. We don't do that
Wow.
anymore. And that's why I have this idea that they're more trying to direct the story rather than trying to knock people off, because it really doesn't help. If you knock people off, that just makes the story bigger, especially if you suddenly you do it the wrong way or people got evidence, then the whole government will fall. I mean, if you try to even threaten somebody, if it gets proved, I mean, the government is going to fall.
That's why we all need to come together as a united coalition to get this information out. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so what do you think happens once it comes out? Do you think we have the technology? I guess is one of the big questions that you didn't do here because we cut you off on questions and stuff. But in terms of technology, what do you think they've got? Because there's always these stories.
Well, according to former Skunkworks engineer, we are 50 years beyond what you could possibly comprehend. That's a direct quote. So I think that's where we're at. We are so far beyond what we can even see in our daily lives as for it to be science fiction. We have
This
made the breakthrough and we've done it. We've done it.
this pisses me off because it takes 5 hours to travel, right? 5 hours
Right.
from West Coast to East Coast. All the time that's wasted.
Absolutely.
It makes me angry,
We are living in a construct. Everything you see out your kitchen window, none of it's real. It's a construct. They are on another level.
Yeah.
Absolutely, they have made the breakthrough by October 1954. But if you go back to Snake River Canyon 1947, I believe that's one of ours. So they had made the breakthrough prior to that. The newspaper clippings, the sighting reports really prove that they have had this ongoing anti-gravity research program cracking the gravity barrier, and they've done it. They've absolutely done it.
But here's the problem. You keep the population dumb and stupid by
Of
going,
course, of
sports, entertainment, vacation,
course.
everybody work like hell to pay for your mortgage,
Yes.
so that you turn the head this way.
Mhm.
Really, if we all got together, our lives would change.
Of course, of course. It's a
And
war. It's a
yeah,
war on information. It's a war about truth and knowledge and science. And the way it was explained to me is throw away Newtonian physics. Okay, so throw away Newtonian physics, think more along the lines of quantum physics, and that's how these things work.
Consciousness, again, consciousness.
Mhm.
Michael, have they ever come to you looking for information?
No, they have not. Because the way this game is played is they don't care what you know, they care what you can prove.
Yeah.
Until you have a piece of physical hardware, you're really not on the radar screen. But the second you get that, now you're something to be looked at and be concerned about. So you're free to go to any university library, get any lecture you want. You're free to do that up on until the point where you get actual material hardware in your hands.
Wow.
Yep, that's how it went down. But I'm glad we could get together. Thank you, Cindy and Grant. It was wonderful to be with
Beautiful.
you, and thank you so much. I'm glad we could get together.
Beautiful. We'll have to do it again another time. We can do
Yeah, we
the
will.
later crash material that you got,
No
and,
problem.
we'll give you a copy of the Ryan Wood thing. We'll bring some of what you brought in, and he'll elaborate some more later this week, which is,
Wonderful.
is what people want to see. The people are looking for the hardware as well.
They
They're
are.
looking for the absolute proof, and hopefully you and Ryan are on the leading edge of this, and hopefully you can find it and bring it forward and end the cover up.
That's what we want to do.
I think it's important to maybe to do another meeting because Michael's been in New Mexico for how long now? 3 months?
It's been 4 months now.
4 months, uncovering documents that's never been seen.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
All the APRO files. Mhm.
Okay, so let's get it. You arrange it, Cindy, and we'll update people on something new, a breaking story. That's what people like is
Absolutely.
something they haven't heard before. So thank you for the research you do. I mean, you've done it for
Okay.
many years. You're well known in what you do, and you're respected in what you do. So I appreciate and the opportunity you've given me to talk to you.
Thank you, Grant. Thank you, Cindy. Great.
Okay, so Grant always starts the meeting by saying, good morning, good afternoon, blah, blah, blah. I would like to end each meeting by saying, everyone watching, if you're watching, there's something about you that's awake. Take that knowledge, talk to friends, family, strangers. Let's just get this information out so we can live a better life. And I have to take a plane ride 5 hours to go to New York. Imagine if it only takes an hour. I mean, how much time that would save. So I challenge those of you watching to do the right thing by speaking up.
Thank you, Cindy.
Well said. Great.
Beautiful. We'll
Okay.
talk to you both later.
Sounds good.
Okay, so
Thanks.
Grant, I need to talk to you.
Okay.
Okay, so
Take care.
we'll stay on, and Michael can
I'll head out. Yeah.
depart.
Thanks,
Yeah,
guys.
you got to turn
Thanks.
your